Good afternoon. It's so good to be back on the Relationship and Marriage Hour this afternoon. We have a very provocative topic, a sobering topic for this afternoon, and we are happy to bring it to you with our guests. Now, last week we spoke about chronic illness and its effect on marriages, and we realized that chronic illnesses can cause breakdown in marriages, can cause stress, lack of intimacy. Also, it can cause um, so many other things, role changes, and so forth. So we realize that it's not easy. And imagine if the chronic illness is not something that's easy. What about when there is a mental issue? And we have someone on our program this afternoon who can give us much more information on mental illnesses in marriages. So, while chronic can be dealt with because one of the spouse can just choose to make other provisions in the marriage in order to help with the situation. But when it comes to mental, it requires much more. So, our guest this afternoon is Dr. Tamika Johnson Deems. She was born in Nassau, Bahamas, and is currently employed as Senior Registrar at the Sandilands Rehabilitation Center and a psychiatrist at Oak Tree Medical Center. She is married to Alric Deems, and they have one son, Amir, and a daughter, Emia. She graduated from St. John's College as a deputy head girl in 2006 and furthered her education at the College of St. Benedict in Minnesota, where she obtained a Bachelor of Arts in Biology in 2010. She then completed the Bachelor of Medical and Bachelor of Surgery program from the University of the West Indies in 2015 and obtained her Doctor of Medicine in Psychiatry in December of 2022. Being passionate about the development of young women, she serves as the president of the Young Ladies Auxiliary and assistant youth leader at the Highway Church of God, Windsor Place. Her mission is to spread awareness about mental health in the community and to decrease the stigma associated with mental health. And I believe that that is one of the things that we really need. So at this time, we invite to the program Dr. Tamika Johnson Dames. Dr. Dames, welcome to Relationship and Marriage Hour. We are so happy to have you with us this afternoon.
Good
Uh,
afternoon, and thanks for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here.
yes, and I'm excited and can't wait to hear how mental health really affects marriages and how we can deal with it to make it at least um, much more easier to deal with because it can be really taxing. And there are some persons, Dr. Tamika, that may have given up on the relationship because mental illness, I believe, is not an easy thing to handle. So, Dr. Namika, I'm going to just allow you to share with us so that we can be, educated as to how
Sure.
mental health really affects the marriages.
Sure. So, the ways in which mental health affects communities at large is vast. So, when we look specifically at relationships or marriages, I decided to break the topic down into three ways. The first way would be that person's inability to perform their role in the marriage. The second would be what the impact is on the spouse that now has to deal with someone that may be battling from a mental illness. And the third way is the impact that it plays on children that may be in the marriage. So let's talk about the spouse that is suffering from a mental illness. So, first and foremost, when you are struggling with mental health challenges, it can significantly impact your ability to meet the obligations that are typically expected of you in the marriage. So, when the spouse struggles with issues, for instance, depression, anxiety, even psychotic illnesses. It affects their ability to work when they're not well. In that case, it would affect their ability to contribute financially to that household. And another significant thing in a marriage is their ability to be intimate. So intimacy is a big thing. So when you are not well, those are key areas that you are unlikely unlikely to be able to perform in. And when it comes to being present in a marriage, that's not just speaking of a physical presence, but being emotionally available and capable of maintaining the dynamics that are required in a marriage. So when we look at healthy marriages, if you have these limitations, there are going to be struggles. Right now, sometimes it's difficult to convince persons when they have chronic illnesses. I know you said in the show already, you mentioned persons dealing with chronic physical illnesses in a marriage. And I know in the Bahamas, and I'm sure worldwide, a lot of persons would agree that it's hard to get a person to take medications. So you tell somebody you have high blood pressure, you need to take these pills to keep the pressure low. And they may take it while they're in hospital and they come out of hospital and all of a sudden the pills go in the drawer, the pills go on the counter. All of the food that you tell them not to eat, they start to eat again. You ask them to diet and exercise, and that goes out of the window, and then they continually become unwell. So mental illness is no different. We have persons that are admitted to our mental hospital, and you tell them, these are the medications that you need to take. This will allow you to function. This will allow you to going back to be the husband that you once were, to going back to be the wife that you once were. And while they're in hospital, they seem to get it. They understand, well, this is what I need to do, and this is how I'm going to keep myself well. And they come out of hospital and they feel so good that they decide, I'm not going to clinic anymore. I'm not taking these medications anymore. And then you start to see that decline. And with every relapse, their ability to function lessens. So someone that 20 years ago, when they were first diagnosed, were still able to hold a job, were still able to contribute financially, were still able to be a good support system in that marriage, all of a sudden, after several relapses, the brain is so damaged that they're unable to function, even at what we consider their new baseline. So that is difficult. And when we look at the spouse that is now dealing with this, you've signed up for marriage, meaning those vows, for many of us, we take those vows seriously. But what does that mean now when I have vowed to be there in sickness and in health? And sickness and in health is not just physical health, that's mental health as well. And it can be really taxing when you are then in a marriage trying to be supportive of someone that does not seem to be making the effort on their part, someone that does not want to be consistent with medication, someone that does not want to be consistent with going to clinic, someone that does not want to go to therapy to get the help that they need. But as the spouse, you are duty bound to still be there and to still be present, and that can be taxing. And then we look at sometimes, when I talk about my platform, I talk a lot about decreasing the stigma. A lot of times, social media is one of the biggest evils. So, social media can be a really good tool because it is how we disseminate information. So, if we look at this platform, I think you had mentioned, yes, it is a radio station, but we have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have all of these platforms that we can use to disseminate information. But there are times that persons use social media for bad. So, someone struggling with a mental health challenge, all of a sudden, years ago, you would know about it if someone tells you, well, yeah, that person was unwell and this happened and that happened. But now in today's society, something happens and someone is unwell. In a matter of minutes, that breakdown is disseminated across the country, it is disseminated across the islands. Persons that are abroad that don't even live in the same country would be able to know and to see. And it was embarrassing, not just for the person that is struggling, but it's embarrassing for the spouse because now everyone knows. And nobody wants to accept when they have a mental illness. Persons would digest saying that their spouse has a physical illness. They will start a GoFundMe, they would request prayer, they would look for support quicker for physical illness than they would when someone has a mental illness. And so that is definitely a challenge that we have. And I always say persons will pick up their phone to record before they pick up their phone to call for help. So it is the shame and embarrassment. And then when we talk about the spouse, there's also this term called caregiver burden. So when you have a spouse that is constantly there, whether it's physically there, emotionally, mentally there, it can be exhausting at times dealing with someone with any type of illness. And in this case, mental illness, it can be tiring. And so it involves taking on additional responsibilities. It can lead to feelings of isolation. It can lead to stress. And so for that spouse that is now placed into this caregiver role, it's important for them to find outside sources of support. And when we look at support, sometimes it's hard getting support for your loved one that has a mental illness because you know that you are there for them, that you want to support them and you want them to do well. But everybody else around you may not want that burden. They may not want to be bothered with your person that is going through this mental headache. When we look at substance use, drug use, sometimes people say, well, it's their choice, but addiction is a disease. And so, even that person that is battling with alcohol, that person that is battling with cocaine, um, that is a struggle because that person that is unwell, now they go through the cycle of, I need drugs and I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get it. If that means I'm going to sell the brand new TV that you just bought, then I'm going to sell the brand new TV. If that means that I'm going to take the money that was for the rent or for the mortgage, I'm going to take that money, I'm going to get the drugs. If that means that the children's school fee have to be used, then it has to be used. And these are some of the challenges that can make or break a marriage. And finally, when we look at the impact on children, so when it comes to children, the way that they process things may be quite different from adults. So kids, they see this tension. They can sense that there's discord in the home and they might not quite understand exactly what is happening. And so it's important for the spouse, the parents, to find ways to explain it to them in a sensitive way, yes, but in a way that they can understand and a way that they don't feel like they are at fault. Because sometimes children tend to take on the blame for when things aren't going well in the home. And sometimes it can cause them to act or it can cause them to perform poorly at school. Can you imagine now the child that has a parent that is suffering from a mental illness, and that parent is up in the middle of the night, not sleeping, making noise, disrupting the home, disrupting the neighborhood? That child isn't asleep. That child can't do homework. That child can't study for a test. They are up. They may be afraid. They may be angry. They may be embarrassed. So there's a whole wide range of emotions that those children go through. So when we look at dealing with mental illness, yes, the person is affected, their spouse is affected, the children are affected, and the community at large, because we make up communities. You want to see marriages that are healthy and that are thriving. And so when I talk about the effects on the home, this is just for persons that are not managing well, because there are many persons that have mental illnesses that function quite well. There are persons that take their medications if they're on medications. There are persons that come to clinic. There are persons that go to therapy and they're able to function. They're able to be the perfect spouse. They are able to be the perfect father to their children. They're able to be the perfect employee, but they do the things that they need to do to keep themselves well. So when we look at the negative impact, it is specifically for those persons that don't do the things that they need to do, and also for those persons that, despite their best efforts, they have an illness that just struggle to get good symptom control. So those are the persons that are really, really affected. And that's why talking about it is so important. Getting support groups, finding persons that are going through a similar struggle that you can talk to and offload on. Definitely important in keeping yourself well, because having one person with a mental illness is a challenge. But could you imagine both persons in a marriage with a mental illness? And it happens because as we talk about finding support and as we talk about, the unity between you talking to someone that understands what you're going through, there are times that people form connections with someone else. So I met this guy at a support group and he struggled with depression or he struggled with drug use. And so we were both clean for a long time and we got married and we had kids and then we both had a relapse. And so then where does that leave you? Because now you have two persons in this relationship that are struggling with mental health issues. So who is there for the next one? And then sometimes that's what happens when we have kids that are displaced now because none of my parents can care for me because they're both unwell. And we see it. We see it every day. And so it's so important to have these conversations because these are things that we go through and people need to be aware. And in being aware, knowing what resources are available and how to direct persons to these resources. So I'm going to open the floor for questions. I know I said a lot and I am long winded.
That is
So,
so, so good. Really, really, that is good to know. And Dr. Dames, you mentioned about the spouse, the well spouse, I should say.
mm,
What type of help can they get? Other, it's just the support group that they're able to get help because this can be very stressful if that person is not taking their medication. But what I also heard from you is that if they are compliant, then you have a happy relationship. There is
mhm.
no need for all of the drama. So, what type of support can be given to a spouse that is dealing with a stubborn person?
So I guess resources are community driven. So for us in the Bahamas, typically the hospital has a caregiver symposium, which is an informational session allowed to give caregivers an opportunity to express some of their concerns when dealing with the challenge of someone with a mental illness or a physical illness. There are support groups that are available. And sometimes support doesn't even have to be that far reaching. Support can be your immediate family and your friend circle. So it is so easy to get wrapped into the cycle of I go to work, I come home, I take care of my spouse who's not well, I take care of the kids, I go to work, I come home, I do this thing over and over again. It is important for that person that is doing the caring to take a break, to say,
Yeah.
listen, this particular day at this particular time, I am going. Whether you are someone that likes to go to the beach, I know our friends in Canada, that beach thing is not an option for them right now.
Not at this time.
but but there are things that you can think about that you find as an outlet for you. And so those are the things that you have to be consistent about tapping into because that's the only way that you will feel like you have a life outside of caring and nurturing and providing and looking into and looking after. And like I said, support doesn't have to be the external group. Support can be from your family and your friends. They may not know exactly what it is you're going through, but being able to vent and talk about what you're going through and be heard, sometimes that does the world of a difference than if you were to keep everything bottled up to yourself and then you end up breaking.
Yeah, yeah. Dr. Alvin has joined us. Dr. Alvin, it's good to have you back on relationship. And
It's
Dr.
good to be
Alvin,
here.
yes, sorry. Dr. Alvin, Dr. Dames spoke about the stigma and
Hmm.
how people can, share about medical or physical illness, but when it comes to mental, it's like something that everyone is trying to hide. Dr. Alvin,
Hmm.
you could weigh in on this conversation, but what I've also learned is mental illness doesn't have to be bad if the spouse is complying with the medication that is given. So, Dr. Alvin,
Um, Good day to you all. Good day, Dr.
Good
Dames.
day, good day.
It's great to have you on the relationship and marriage hour. Good day, Dr. MacDonald. Um, Doc, one of the things that surprised me here in the Bahamas, and I'm going to talk about the culture I think it is a cultural difference. Um, when I finished College of the Bahamas back in the day, one of the criterias was that you had to do so many hours of community service. And I decided to go to the Salvation Army School of Deaf and Blind. And it was there that my eyes was open because I was like, I didn't know we had deaf and blind people in our society. Not the amount that I saw at that one school.
Right.
Um, and then when I went off to university in America, I saw people taking their disabled children to the movies. They took them to events and all of that type of stuff. And I'm like, oh my Lord, what is this? It was a culture shock. And then I was like, you mean to tell me we make it have all of these people in our society, but because of our culture, we are ashamed. But because of shame, we hide these persons at home. And I think, Doc, that and I hear you, Dr. James, many families are suffering and they are suffering in silence.
Correct.
And one of the way to remove the stigma is to do what we're doing now, shedding light that this happens, but it's not the end of the world. Um, when I found out, when my wife and I found out that our son was autistic, Doc, and I shared this with you, Dr. Maria, time and time again on this show, that the first thing I did was I cried. But I didn't cry because he was autistic. I cried because he was autistic in the Bahamas.
That's right. Yes.
And my wife and I questioned us coming back to this society. And we were like, should we pick up and go back to America? Just for him, because the culture is different.
Mm.
But I like the fact that we are talking about it now to share light that many people are dealing with disabilities, but we're sharing light, especially on mental disabilities.
Yes.
And some of them are dealing with this to no fault of theirs.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, if they are disabled, we need to find remedies to help them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what you are doing, Dr. James, and I applaud you today, um, to actually even be a Bahamian to go off and study this area. Because coming from our society, we know, and let's be real about it. If you have a mental problem, you got a demon.
Yes. Pray. You need
And
to
what you
pray.
need to do
You need to
is
pray.
just cast that demon out.
You are
Yes.
right.
So you aren't just coming against a culture, you're coming against a belief, a religious belief system.
That's right.
And that is rough. So, Dr. James, I take my hat off to you.
Thank
You,
you.
you, you. I took the easy way out. I went and I studied engineering. But but we need as a society, not just here in the Bahamas, but there are many cultures who throw away these people who are dealing with mental health, whereas we can give them things that they can cope, that
Mm-hmm.
they can still make it and be productive in our society. And it is not just like we talked about, like I came in and hear Doc talking about, it is not just the person dealing with the ailment, it's those who are around because they now have to bore or bear some of that shame and ostracism and disgrace.
Yes.
But until we step from behind the dark ages and say, this is reality, and we need to help, then we will go down, continue to go down a dark path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You made so many good points. I wish I could remember to comment on all of them.
Oh,
But the first point you made about your son being diagnosed and you being concerned about the culture, um, that is such that is such a common phrase that I hear from persons that have kids with mental illness. And you said with the persons that were deaf, the persons that were blind, and knowing that they are being hidden at home. Sometimes it's not that the families want to hide their loved ones, but it's that the community doesn't
yes,
understand and people are
yes,
mean and
True.
insensitive. And
yes,
so sometimes the hiding is not because you are ashamed. Sometimes the hiding is to protect
yes,
them
yes.
from persons that are
Mm-hmm,
mean.
mm-hmm,
I gave
mm-hmm.
a presentation at some point last year and I spoke about, there are small things that you can do to be kind. Someone that has a child that may be on the spectrum, someone that has a child that has intellectual disability or any other mental illness, you may see them lashing out in public. I mean, I have a toddler, and toddlers in general can sometimes just be vicious,
Mm-hmm.
right? But sometimes you see persons that are unwell and they may have things going on. And instead of us be supportive to that family, we point and say, oh, I don't know why they don't keep that child home, or I don't know why the child don't stop doing that. These parents don't know what to do. And that's hard for the parent that is trying
Yes.
their best, that is giving it their all. You come out into public and then you're being ostracized. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the emotional toll of coming out is just too much. And again, that takes us back to stigma. Another thing you mentioned about me choosing to do psychiatry, when I made this decision about 10 years ago, it was actually between obstetrics and gynecology or psychiatry. And I've been asked numerous times, oh, why did you choose that? After doing my elective period and after doing my rotations and going to our mental hospital assignments, I was blown away by the cases, by the disorders. That was one of the few areas that I was happy about going home to read. Like what happens in the brain that causes this? Like what exactly goes on and how do you manage these conditions? Like I just found it so fascinating. And at
Mm-hmm.
that time, mental health was not a big thing. I think the
Mm-hmm.
COVID-19 pandemic, when we went through Hurricane Dorian here in the Bahamas, that kind of sparked a new thing as it relates to mental health. So more and more people are becoming open about talking about mental health, about getting help from mental health. So we are still a long ways from where we need to be, but we are definitely getting somewhere. And I'm really happy to be a part of the movement because it
Mm-hmm.
is a movement. It's a movement now because people are understanding and realizing that mental illness has no face. It does not pick only the lowest of the low. You can have mental illness regardless of your status in life, regardless of how much money you have in the bank. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter your
Mm-hmm.
family. It can happen to anyone. So I think with us recognizing that we're not safe, people are becoming more and more accepting and more understanding. But we have some ways to go. I agree.
Mm-hmm. I remember, Doc, that my son, I think he may have been about 3, going on to 4. I had to take him to get tape up for my brother-in-law who was getting married, so he was standing in the wedding.
Mhm.
So I took him to the place to get tape up, and he was carrying on bad. He was carrying on bad, and I keep on saying, AJ, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Talk to daddy. And the people in the store start just saying, oh, take him in the room and beat him, because he too rude. Just go and beat him. Just go and beat him. And I looked around and I'm like, okay, no, let me just take him out of this environment. So I carried him to the fitting room, and I said, AJ, what's going on? And he was just getting ready because he was nonverbal for a good while. And he didn't know sentences yet. And I'm like, AJ, what's going on? And my mind clicked in, Alvin, he can't tell you, you ask him questions. So I started asking him questions. I said, what, do you not want to be here? He said, no, that's not it. And long story short, I looked at him and I said, what, do you want to use the restroom? And he said, yes, yes.
Oh.
So I carried him to the bathroom. He used the restroom, and he was the perfect guy after that.
Wow.
And when we walked out, he went and he got taped up, and everybody in the store was like, what happened? This is a different boy. And then I looked at them, and I think this is where parents now need to speak up. And I said, not everybody needs a beating.
Right.
People process differently. You need to find out what children need, and you need to listen and give them what they need. And the
Yes.
woman who was taping him up was one of the persons who was saying, take him in the room and beat him. She had to apologize to me, because I then said to her, he processed different. He don't think his mind isn't working the way ours is working.
Yes.
And my wife loves to use this analogy. She said, you would not go up to a blind person and say, man, you just need to see.
Right.
No, you realize there is a disability and you cater to them at that level.
Yes.
And that's where this nation, our nation, and other nations around the world need to come to realize that there are limitations. Meet them at their limitation and help them that they can cope.
Right.
And then our society will be a whole lot better.
Yes. Agreed.
Yeah. So I just think that our culture needs to change.
Yes.
And the culture is only going to change when strong people like you, Dr. Dames, and your team, and those, Dr. Maria, who makes these conversations possible, get out there and start talking.
Right.
Because listen, my son helping me spell words now. When I can't spell a word, I look at my son and I say, how to spell this? And he look at me, oh, daddy. And he just smarter than me.
Right.
Very good. Very good. Wow. And
Yeah,
Dr.
so
Tamika,
mhm.
this is a great conversation. And, I believe that our audience are all listening. And I want them to know that they are listening to the Relationship and Marriage Hour that is coming to you from Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. And we are the number one Caribbean diaspora online radio in Canada. And we invite our listeners to subscribe, watch us on Facebook, YouTube, X, and Instagram, and all of the other programs. You can join in and um, become active, or you can call us or WhatsApp a message to us at the number will be posted on the screen. So please give us a call on WhatsApp. And if you have any questions for Dr. Tamika, please send in your questions. Or if you have any comments, please give us your comments. And we would be happy to have those questions answered. Dr. Tamika, when a person is going through a difficult mental illness with a spouse, and there are some persons that may strive, there are some persons who may determine, look, I can't take this, I have to give it up, and they may decide they want out on the marriage. In the event a person walks out on that marriage because they cannot cope, they can, and for their sanity, they feel this is the best way out. How difficult is it for that spouse that is already suffering with a mental disorder? Does it perhaps cause them to go deeper, or what happens to that person?
So two things can be a possibility. Um, Definitely, if you have a mental illness, if you're not managing well, and if it's so bad to the point where your spouse can no longer cope, which means that you're probably in a really, really bad spot. Having that one support system leave you can definitely put you at risk for worsening of that condition, because the person that may have been urging you to attend clinic, the person that may have been prompting you to take your medications, the person that may have been hiding the drugs, if you're someone that was using drugs, is now gone. So you're left to your own defenses. And if you are not mentally well, that doesn't leave you with a whole lot. Now, in some cases, those persons, when the spouse leaves, that may be a wake up call. Doesn't always happen, but it could be, because now you realize, well, I had everything. At one point, things were going well. My spouse was there for me, was encouraging me, and now my spouse is fed up with the path that I've chosen. For some persons, they are so unwell that they can't even formalize, a sensible thought to say this is what I should do and this is what I shouldn't do. But there are some persons that once they are on their medications, once they are doing well, they have enough sense to know that this is what I need to do to keep myself well. So having that spouse now leave may be a wake up call to say, hey, I need to get my act together. If I want the life that I once had, there are some things that I need to do to make life better for me. So it can be a wake up call, but it can also be the start or the continuation of the decline that the spouse was seeing, and which is really unfortunate. When we look at mental health, there is a term that we call, it's called a downward drift. And it speaks to the fact that persons with mental illnesses, especially those that are chronic, tend to drift downward in society for a variety of reasons. One, if you are unwell, you're unable to keep a job. So if you can't keep a job, that speaks to lack of finances. So you have no money, you have no job. What happens to having a place to stay? You don't have a place to stay, you end up homeless. You are homeless, and you have other persons that are in that same environment that may be using drugs and just begging on the streets to survive. You end up doing that too. And so bit by bit by bit, your status, your place in society starts to drift downward, especially when you start to burn bridges. Because there are some persons that they move from house to house. So things didn't go too well with my spouse, I moved in with my parents. Things didn't go too well with my parents, I moved in with my siblings. Things didn't go too well with my siblings, I moved in with some friends. Things didn't go well then. Before you know it, I've burnt every possible bridge. And now the only place that I have left is the streets. So it's sad to watch the decline, especially in persons that could have gotten a handle on themselves had they taken the advice that they were given the first time around. Because when it comes to mental illness, if you catch it early on, if you're able to start treatment early on, your chance of recovery is greater than someone that has had relapse after relapse after relapse. So that's kind of what can possibly happen.
Doc, right there. So, how far is too far when it comes to treatment for mental illness? So, and my question is like, okay, a patient comes to you and you're like, oh Lord, no, they're too far gone. There's nothing we can do. Um, help our audience audience understand, because there are some of them who are clouded, and because their loved one said, I'm fine, I can be all right. I don't need no treatment. I
Hmm.
didn't beat this before, I can beat it again. What do they need to be able to see to say, you know what, listen, you are going over a threshold that there is no return, if that's even possible.
So every case is different and
Okay.
every illness is different. So among the various illnesses, there are some persons that we consider them to be treatment resistant, right? Or there are persons that have what we call residual symptoms, which means I have given you standard of care. So standard of care is I give you two different trials of medications at maximum dose to see if they are effective, and you still don't resolve. There's still no remission in symptoms. Then we would say, okay, this is treatment resistant. So you try all of the adjunct medications that you can possibly try. You try therapy, and there's still no resolution. Then you would say this person has treatment resistant illness. But that's not something that you would be able to say off the bat. So someone comes in, no matter how sick they are, and we have seen some very, very sick people. We never say, oh, there's nothing we could do. So it doesn't quite work that way in mental illness.
Mhm.
Us saying, well, you know what, at this point in time, this is this person's baseline.
Mhm.
That's probably more along the term that we would use. So, for example, someone, you and I, the three of us are having a logical conversation, right? We do not have a mental illness or a thought disorder that is preventing us from being able to speak and express ourselves. But there are some persons that have thought disorders that, when not treated, they can't form a logical sentence. No matter how hard they try, they may make up words. We have terms like neologisms, thought salad, word salad, right? So they
Mhm.
make up these terms, and so you can't really understand or pick up on their train of thought. So, in cases like that, if we find that, you know what, we have given this person every treatment on the book and nothing seems to be working. So, at baseline, they will never be able to communicate effectively. They will never be
Mhm.
able to form sentences again. We have tried and we've not been successful, and we've tried every different modality that there is possible. So,
Mhm.
that comes after having tried. There's never a time where we see somebody and the first time we see them, we automatically say no. Because I've seen some very, very sick persons, and then in a matter of days, they are fully resolved. And I'm
Oh
like,
wow.
so you mean to tell me the only thing you needed was to not use drugs and to take medications, and you would have been okay all along? Stop.
Wow.
So there
Wow.
are some persons you would be surprised at the turnaround, and they don't believe, they don't remember how unwell they were until, for instance, if someone had a video of things that they were doing, things that they were saying, and they see the video, some persons are like, I don't think that's me. You sure that's me? That was you, my friend. That was you. So there are some persons that are in awe when you tell them what they did, when you tell them what they said or how they acted,
Mhm.
and then they see how well they recover. You
Mhm.
know, but it's hard to say that on first glance. It's very
Mhm.
hard to say.
Okay.
Wow. And wow. What then, Dr. James? This is really good. And okay, if we're looking on the flip side of that,
Mhm.
there are some persons that have a rough relationship. Actually, I just spoke with someone yesterday, and she was saying because of the bad treatment in the relationship, her sister had to seek help mentally. Can a relationship tip a person over to the point where they have to, or is there some hidden um, illnesses already in that person?
So that's a really good question. So now we are coming to the topic of the causes. What
Mhm.
causes a mental illness?
Mhm.
So it's multifactorial. So yes, there are, in most cases, persons have a genetic predisposition, meaning there is something in your genes, in your bloodline,
Jesus.
that causes you to be more likely to develop a mental illness. Now, the point at which that mental illness is evident or present can be caused by a variety of factors. So, we
Mhm.
found that certain illnesses, when you see kids go off to college, you look at that transition period in life. So you move from your parents' home, especially if this is a child that is going abroad to school. So this is your first time separated from the security and protection of your parents' home. You're away in college. There's the stress of college work that is quite different from that of high school. And then there's additional things. You're learning about relationships, about friendships. You're learning to fend for yourself. So the stress that happens at that particular point in time then causes that gene for whatever mental illness to now be turned on. So it's almost like a switch. And then when it comes to trauma, so someone that was in a relationship and the relationship may have been stressful, they may have been physically, mentally, sexually abused. Abuse is one of those things that can definitely cause someone to now develop a mental illness downstream. And you find that a lot of persons, when you look at their social histories, when you talk about anxiety, depression, and even psychosis, you do have some trauma history in the background. that says, okay, this is more than likely one of those factors that led to the development of this illness. So, yes, someone that was in a relationship that was stressful, that was traumatic, they can develop a mental illness because of the stress of that relationship. But in a lot of cases, it is also because they were already genetically predisposed to developing said illness in the first place. And same as with drugs. So, a lot of young guys, I would say, I know that you guys like to talk about drinking alcohol, using marijuana, and people would say, well, I mean, I don't see the problem. All of my friends do it and nothing wrong with my friends. Well, you and your friends have a completely different genetic makeup. So, what would affect your friends would not affect you, and vice versa. So it depends on a variety of factors.
Mhm. And I'm glad you said that, Dr. James, because people believe the way I'm made up, I can eat anything and I'm well. And then they go and try it. And it reminded me of my first child. One person came out and they said, oh, birth was not bad. But for me, it was something else. So it is something that, you know, our makeup is different. So,
Yes.
and it brings to a point too. Persons may want to share medicine, but I imagine you would give them medication based on their genetic, what they can take and what so forth.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So go ahead. Yeah.
And I always say when it comes to medications, that's another good topic because, when they create medications to treat depression, anxiety, psychosis, and all these other illnesses, there are several medications on the market for a reason. One reason is because every company wants to have their own brand, but
Mhm.
one of the reasons that we know is because different medications work well for different persons for a variety of reasons. So there are some persons, they take a medication and they feel nauseous, they can't keep any food down, they get bad headaches, and then somebody else can take that very same medication and they do perfectly well with no side effects. So you can't, it's not a one size fit all method for everybody.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Wow.
Dr.
Interesting stuff. And there's so many things out there that can lead to discord and even separation in the family. And we just need to shine a light and let people know that help is available. Um, and boy, you can big up enough support groups,
Mhm.
because with my son, and when my wife and I joined the Reach program here in the Bahamas, it was like a breath of fresh air for us, because we found persons, and when we hear them express their experiences, we realize it wasn't just us two or us three against the world. We realize that, listen, others are going through, others have been going through for years, and they're able to make it. So
Mhm.
Yes.
support groups, I think, will be a key component in helping to break this stigma, this culture of, if you sick, let me hide you. Or even on the other side, if you sick, let me protect you.
Right.
But what we need to do, expose, let people know that this is reality. And I have talked to many persons, even people in teenage pregnancy, who share with me, oh well, I'm going to have the perfect baby and all that type of stuff, and that does not have to happen.
Right.
And they think that everything would be well, but the family needs to be able to say, okay, it's not going to separate us, but it's going to pull us together. We're going to get all of the resources that we see are available, and we are going to use it to help not just better us, but to better the next generation.
Mhm.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So this is powerful.
It
I've
sure
enjoyed.
is. Yes. as we speak, there may be persons in the audience, Dr. Alvin, that
Mhm,
may be the person battling with mental issues,
mhm,
but they are controlling themselves well. And it's only when they are not taking their medication they probably act out. One of the things I would like to say to those persons is help your spouse out, because
mhm,
I believe that this can be extremely taxing on the spouse that is well, because
Mhm.
not only are they now pitching in and maybe sharing roles with you, but they also have to be concerned about your well-being,
mhm,
plus continue to take care of their house, whatever. So for those spouses that are still able to deal with it in a uh, proper manner, then I would say to them, help your spouse,
mhm.
because
And
this is
that's
what
where
we
love
have.
comes, Doc.
Huh?
That's
Yeah.
that's the love factor right there.
Yes.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah, you want me to help you, but then you need to help me too.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
help yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And people
Exactly.
don't realize too. And Doc, I think you and I talked about this before, Dr. Maria, as to when you go on a plane, the stewardess or the person
Mhm.
says, "Put the mask on you first,
That's
Right.
right.
and
That's right.
then assist others." We have trained people, oh, forget about yourself and help others, but
Mhm.
sometimes doing that you end up hurting because you're
Yes,
hurting.
Right.
But
that's
if
right.
you can focus on yourself, know where your limitations are, and do
Mhm.
what you have to do to better you, then when you get into a relationship, you then say to your partner, well, this is as far as I could go, this is my limitations, and I
Mhm.
can do this, I can do, and then now your partner knows how to gauge the situation,
That's
Right.
how
right.
to step in and to be of assistance.
That's right.
So it don't make sense you denying what the problem is.
Hmm.
And Doc, this is where I see people now throwing the Christianity card. Oh, I rebuke that in Jesus' name.
Mm-hmm.
And and then they say, well, I have faith that God can heal me, which is
Yes.
true. We all have faith that God can heal us. But even in my talking and counseling, I say to people, if your leg is broken, your leg is broken. Don't
Yes.
deny that it's broken.
Exactly. Deal with the
Saying your
broken
leg
part.
is broken is not you saying you don't have faith.
That's
Yes.
right.
That's you
That's right.
being in denial. Your leg broke, your leg broke. Just say, my leg broke, but I know Jesus can heal me. And that's where
Um,
the faith comes in. That
that's it.
so you acknowledge where you are, you acknowledge
Exactly.
your limitations, and then people can step in to help. Because that's another
That's it.
problem too,
It is a
is
big one.
people want to help, but when you saying I okay, then you
You
push
can't.
people away.
Right.
That's right.
And I always tell persons, I said, I hate when people try to separate getting help for mental illness
Hmm.
from Christianity, because they make
Right.
it seem like it's either one or the other. And I said, listen to me, I'm a girl. I grew up in the church. Dr. Marie
Well,
can tell you
hallelujah.
from I was in my mother's womb
Yes,
Yes.
we
and
all.
still in church. And I don't think that the Lord would have given me the strength to do 11 years of school just for the fun of it. I think
That's
that
it.
this was very much God ordained. So
Mhm.
when
That's right.
persons say, oh, well, I mean, I believe in God and I trust God. And I'm like, I trust God too. How do you think I got here?
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I
Uh-huh.
think he sent me to you so that I can help you. And
That's
and
right.
the analogy that you gave about the broken leg, I promise you I use that all the time, because if you break your leg right now, you're gonna pray and have faith that the doctor can fix it and put the leg back
Uh-huh.
together.
Thank
So
That's
you.
you
right.
should be able to have faith that persons that work in mental health can help
That's
you to
right.
get through your challenges, and you can still pray and you can still fast. But if I tell you take the pills too.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And
I
still
agree.
pray. You can
That's
do
Yeah.
right.
all things. All
That's
of
right.
those things can work together to help
Hmm.
you. But it
Mhm.
That's
can't
it.
be, it doesn't have to be one or the other.
That's
Mhm.
right.
Yes.
This
Yeah.
this is really good. And I
Mhm.
trust that our audience are listening and, you know, maybe want to send in a comment or a question. And Dr. Dames, we have about 6 more minutes.
Mhm.
What is something you can share with our audience, especially those that are dealing with a sick spouse, mentally sick spouse?
So I like the one of the final points that we ended on just now when we spoke about putting your mask on first. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And I know that
Powerful, powerful.
the journey of dealing with a loved one with mental illness can be taxing. It can be emotionally taxing, physically taxing, mentally taxing. It is exhausting at times.
Mhm,
But in order for you to be there for them, you have to be there for yourself. So
mhm,
every time you think about the things that you have to do to keep your spouse in check, think about the things that you need to do to keep yourself well. This
mhm,
does not mean that life as you know it for yourself is done. If there are things that you enjoy doing, schedule those things in, because that is the only way that you will now have the strength and the energy to then go on and pour into your spouse and help your spouse through that journey.
mhm,
Um, you are not alone, is another point I want to make.
mhm,
Sometimes it is lonely when you feel as though you have no one to talk to, as though you have no support, but you are not alone. And if you are, I don't know where you are in the world, but find out what resources are available in your country. Dr. Hepburn mentioned support groups. Support groups are an amazing source of strength,
mhm,
because then you don't feel as though you are talking to a wall. You don't feel as though you're talking
mhm,
to people that don't understand. So, speaking to people that are going through a similar situation that can give you tips and tricks on how they survive and how they
mhm,
overcame
mhm,
is so very helpful. And if
mhm.
you are praying people, if you are religious people, always stay connected to God, because sometimes you need strength like no other.
Yes,
You
yes,
need
yes.
that strength like no other to reach
That's
out to
right.
you. And so never neglect that prayer life if you are a praying person. So find things that keep you grounded. Find
Mhm.
things that keep you connected to who you are so that you are able to now pour into that spouse.
Powerful, powerful,
Yes, indeed, Dr. Alvin. And
powerful, powerful.
it sure is, and to our listening audience, if your leg is broken, you are going to run to the doctor and ask him
That's
to
right.
fix it. So
And
for
give you
those,
some painkillers too.
and painkillers
Immediately.
with it. So you're not going to walk on it. You're not going to walk on that broken leg.
Mhm.
So why is it when there's a mental issue,
Broken in the mind. Yeah.
you want to throw down the tablets and actually come through the medication that you, and that's why the Lord bless us with doctors like Dr. Dames,
Mhm,
who have taken time out of their lives just to study so they can be able to help those persons. So if there
mhm.
is mental illnesses in your family, it's not anything to be ashamed of.
No,
We
no.
trust that our people will understand, you know, it can happen to the best of us. And we have persons like Dr. Dame said earlier, they are operating, they're functioning, they're working, and they are serving meaningful position in society with mental illness. And
Mhm,
no one knows what's happening because they are following the doctor's instruction. So
mhm,
we want our audience, if there is problems of such in your marriage, it's not the end. What creates more problem, I got from Dr. Dames, is when you do not follow instructions.
mhm, mhm,
And when you do not follow instruction, it affects you, your family, your children. So many lives are at stake. So I encourage the married people to come together, talk about it. If you love your spouse, then you would follow the doctor's instructions.
mhm.
Hey, Dr. Alvin, your final
Yes,
words.
we are so blessed, Doc. I think we have someone who's here to take our job. She did such an excellent job. Thank you so much, Doc, for gracing us with your presence, Dr. James. Yes, from Nassau, Bahamas, who is dealing with mental brokenness. We could call it that, mental brokenness. And the Lord, I want to say this, the Lord has anointed her to help to mend the mind, and that
Yes,
is healing to the mind. And if you are out there, you can send us your comments, and you can send us your questions. that even though Doc may not be here, we can forward them to her to find out what you can do. You can text us or you can call us at 437-778-3299. Join in the conversation. We are here at the Marriage Relationship Hour to help you. So once again, you can text us or WhatsApp us at 437-778-3299. And it was a privilege to have you join us. So re-watch. Send it to a friend. Send it to someone who you know needs this. And we will see you next week for another powerful conversation. And Dr. James, we want to thank you again for being a part.
My
And
pleasure.
you are not a guest anymore. You may hear your phone ring again.
Oh,
But
yes.
so much for joining us today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank you
Doc.
for having me.
Thank you.
Good to have
Yes.
you.